Now, today is part 2 of our session that we began a few days back with Shaykh Mujahid Abdul Karim from Fayda Institute, who is also a good friend of mine and also worked with me at Bayaan Academy.com. We are here today continuing our conversation with Shaykh Mujahid. Last session he talked about his acceptance to Islam, his interest into African American history after he read Malcolm X, going to Morgan State University, as well as Howard University, both of which are historically Black universities, and his early days in the MSA, and then getting the zeal to go abroad to study and find and research on his own, what Islam had to say. So he began that journey with going to Morocco, Fez, came back and he was advised to go to Mauritania and to meet one of the scholars who has now passed away, Shaykh Mujahid Abdul Karim and other ulama of Mauritania. So Shaykh, we left off at that cliffhanger last meeting with you going to Mauritania. So let's begin with, if you can backtrack a little bit, you landing in Mauritania. Here's an American, Californian, coming to Mauritania, and those of you who don't know, Mauritania that's West Africa, south of Morocco by the shore. So if we can start from there, Shaykh Mujahid, your journey abroad.
نعم. طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه تسليما كثيرا اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد فاتم لما أغلق وخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. طيب alhamdulillah, I'm glad to be back. To begin where we left off the other day with my journey to Mauritania, in preparation, as I said that I was kind of coached or prepared to go for the trip by a good couple of friends of mine, along with Sheikh Saleh, Rami Al-Sour, and Nabil Afifi in California. And going to Mauritania, when I landed, I met with a friend, a contact that I was given, and he turned out to be one of my good friends today, Mukhtar Bah. And from the capital city that day, when I reached the capital city that night, I was in a truck on the way to the village of Marabat al-Hajj in Tourmarat, which is about a 14 to 15 hour drive in the mountains. Like it was like really far in the mountains. And when I got there, it was such such a foreign place. And from anything I've ever experienced, I quickly learned that whatever I had left back in America, I didn't have with me. Meaning my appetite, the luxury of being in America, the luxury of having all those amenities, the comforts of living were now gone. And that night I was in a tent, and I had a sleeping bag and a cot, because in the desert, on the ground, you can't, if you sleep on the ground, it's problematic. Let's just say that. You have a lot of things crawling and things in the desert. The scorpions were there, desert mice, and a lot of other things. That
do you land in Nouakchott? Is that where you landed?
I landed in Morocco. I first went to Morocco. I connected through Morocco okay. to Dar al-Bayda, to Casablanca, and then to Nouakchott. Because Mauritania is just below Morocco, right? So so I was excited. I was excited to have the opportunity to learn, but like I said, I really didn't understand what was in front of me and what I was in store for. And I got sick immediately. I got sick immediately because when you travel that far, your body's not used to the bacteria. It's not used to the air. Anything you eat, there's, your body's just not used to the environment, and it's natural. You're going to get sick. So I got sick for about, I would say, man, it was over a week. I was in my tent by myself. I couldn't even. I mean, I had a loose stomach. I was sick, and I was scared. Now that I recall, I was really scared. But Shaykh had Jameen, I hadn't met him yet, but he sent students to my tent with this, with food and things to drink that was somewhat what they had, like medicine or something. And I got better, alhamdulillah. I really just, try my best to trust in Allah and trust that I was doing the right thing, because I had doubts. I had doubts in myself. I had doubts whether I was going to be able to take it, if I was going to be able to last the journey. But when I got well, I went to meet the shuyukh, and there were four there at the time I was there.
So before we get to the shuyukh, let me ask you, how far was the nearest hospital to you if you had to go to the infirmary?
Well, when I said that whatever I left, all the luxuries and amenities, where I was, there was none of that. If you got sick, you got sick. You had to. There was no hospital. There was no. The closest city was Giru, which was the city of Shaykh Mujahid Ahmad Fayda, and that was 7 hours away.
Subhanallah. So if you get sick, you got to know your herbs or your local stuff or ruqya.
Yeah, you have to just. You all the comfort, all the securities of living that I was used to, I didn't have. I quickly, it quickly, showed me, where I was and what I was in for. And
in the first week there, did you have any remorse? Like, where am I? Did I make the right? I came on this path of knowledge, and I'm in Mauritania. Did you have remorse the first week? Like, where did I end up being?
Of course, I had doubts. I woke up and what am I doing? I questioned myself. Where am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And it was a period of really of self-reflection. I had to really dig down, and the desert, it tests your fortitude for sure. But like I said, the other day, I really, really wanted this acknowledged. It was something that I felt I had to do, and no matter what was in front of me, I had to go through it. And so I stuck with it, alhamdulillah. I really didn't have much of a choice. I mean, it's not like I could just get up and just walk away.
Well, there's always a point when people go on the path of knowledge. Like when I went to Egypt and other places, of course, they were much more hospitable when I went to study in Egypt, Arabic. But where's there a point where you finally said, you know what, I'm going to do this, and this debate of going back, booking my ticket, when did that mental debate end? Because that's where the real learning begins, when that mental debate is over. So how long did that mental fight, how long did it last, and when did it end?
Well, after I got well, I started, and I went to my first lesson. The first sheikh that I met was Sheikh Qatri. He was a sheikh that very, very well known, very well respected, but he no longer teaches. He was the son-in-law, I believe, of Shaykh Mujahid Hajj. He came to America before. He was the first teacher, I believe, that came from Mauritania to America, to Zaytuna, long before I got there. So he was the first sheikh that I met. But after I got well, I put in my mind to this is what I'm going to benefit from the time I'm here, inshallah. And I made dua, and I just depended on Allah, and I went out to my first lesson with Shaykh Jameen was my first lesson. And Shaykh Jameen at the time was the senior sheikh in the village, because when I was there, Murad Abdul Hajj, he no longer was teaching. He was too old. He was confined to his tent, and he was there, but he no longer was able to teach. So I went to Shaykh Mujahid, and it was like seeing an old relative. I mean, literally, I smile now, but to keep from crying, his face, like it was yesterday. He recently passed away, rahimahullah. But he was like an old relative. He sat on the ground and on the dirt, in the sand, and he sits there and he teaches to the students all day. And his face is like the light of the moon. Wallahi, it lights up. And he treated me like I was his son, which I came to know this is the way he treats all the foreign students that come there. There were very few that came there, but those that came, this is how he treated them. And he gave me my first lesson. I started the book, which was a book in Maliki fiqh, Siraj Salik, that I teach now on Fayda Institute. But I started the book with him there, and then every day I went a lesson to Shaykh Mujahid. Then I went to Shaykh Abdullah, who was Shaykh Murabit's grandson. He was Shaykh Murabit's grandson. Then I went to Shaykh Murabit, Muhammad Tahir. He was Shaykh Murabit's son, his youngest son.
So can I ask you, how many foreigners were there, and how big were these halaqas of knowledge? Like amongst you, how many students were studying with the Shaykh, and how did the lessons look like? Like how were the lessons delivered?
Yeah. Well, the village is it's a small village. It was a small village. There was when I first got there was one foreign student there from France. His name was Abdul Malik, a Faransi. MashaAllah. He was a good brother. And he had been there a little while before I got there. And it's interesting, I go to West Africa, and the first student I meet that's not from that wasn't Mauritanian was a white brother from France. So we joked, and he spoke English, some English, and but we were studying, we were students, so we spoke a lot of Arabic, and he ended up being a good friend, alhamdulillah. And but we were the only two foreigners there, and the students were, I would say, there was no more than, when I got there was no more maybe than 30, if that, maybe 20 to 30 students. Mm-hmm. And most of them were families that were living there. They were Bedouins, so there were families that were living there. There were, young students there studying with the shuyukh, learning Quran. A lot of what they do is there, a lot of them, they study with their fathers first. They learn Quran. So in Mauritania, they memorize Quran, many of them by the age of 7 to 10, they're hafiz of Quran. And they have a strong tradition, and at night they recite poetry, and that's their entertainment. Some kids maybe have what they will call a soccer ball or a football. You may see some of that, some of the kids playing, but most of all, the village is kind of spread out, and their family. So there was a student there from Ibrahim. He was from, I want to say Gambia, Guinea Conakry, I think it was. And he was studying with Dr. Khalil, with Shaykh Mujahid, and so I quickly got acclimated and learned the system, learned the routine, where I would go every day about 9 o'clock. I wake up and I would go to Shaykh Mujahid first, and he would treat me like, he would talk to me, ask me how I'm doing, ask me how my mother was, ask me how my family was back home. And, his lessons he would make me as comfortable as possible. He would offer me, he would tell his grandson to bring bring me some what they call shneen, like it's like milk. It was at the time Muhammad Yahya. So at first I didn't understand what he was telling him, but he went. I saw his grandson Muhammad Yahya would go and take a wooden bowl and go to the goat and just milk the goat right there from the udder and take the bowl and give it to me. And I was like, oh no, can't do that. There's no way I can drink that. And I said, Shaykh, I said, I can't, I have an American stomach. I can't. And he laughed, he just laughed. And, I mean, I don't, I'm not a milk drinker anyway, but just the idea of just drinking straight from the udder, which to me was, I mean,
and this was a sign of honoring, I guess, a foreign student, an older student. This was in what year, 2000 when you're out there? Like what year are we in currently?
This is about 2000, 2001. That was after 9/11. So okay. It was 2000, just after 9/11. I remember. But this was their adab. This is what they're offering me, and I felt bad. But I explained to the Sheikh that my stomach is right now it's not in good shape. And so he laughed. Shaykh had to mean, mashallah, he just laughed and he understood. And he gave me advice. He would give me advice all the time. Don't eat this, don't eat the fruit, don't eat the couscous there. You get very sick, And for our lessons, he was very animated. He would explain things very clearly to me. It took his time. He would draw, when we got like the Babla Hajj, he would draw diagrams in the sand and things like that. So his style of teaching would make me very comfortable.
So let me ask you, they're drawing diagrams in the sand. Why not paper and pen? I know it sounds like a silly question, but that's pretty good.
And when you go to Mauritania, where I was, you're going back in time. So you're going back in time. You're not in the modern world anymore. So the students wrote on the low, which are the wooden tablets, which is in traditional Islamic studies. Students wrote on a wooden tablet called the low, and they would make their own ink from charcoal and other ingredients, and they would write each letter, dipping the wood stick with a pen, the column in the ink, and writing. They'd write the whole Quran out, or whatever lesson they were studying, the lines, they'd write their lines out, and you would recite the lines to the Shaykh, and he would explain them to you. You'd go back and memorize them for the day. And so you do that until you finish the book.
Now, is that low, is that an erasable low, or is like once you were done with that, what happens to that ink and that paper? Like, what do you do?
It's erasable when you finish memorizing. Once the low is full, you wash it off with water.
Okay.
You wash it off, you scrub it off with water, and so before you rinse it off, you have to make sure you have it memorized, right? Because there was no paper, there was no pens and pencils as we know it.
Now right? We take a cell phone, take a snapshot,
No snapshot. There was no, none of that. iPads and stuff like that. No. So I learned how to adapt quickly. Alhamdulillah. So I was very eager to learn, and I'd ask questions. When I got to Rami gave me some good advice. He told me that every day, go to every Sheikh in there that's teaching, right? So I would go from Shaykh Hadimeen, then I would go to Shaykh Abdullah. And Shaykh Abdullah, his style of teaching was very different. He was like a statesman. He was all business. He greet you. I'd watch him pray Salatu Duha every day in the sand. And he sat straight up. He was a pure alim. He was an amazing man. But he sat straight up, and he would, it was all business. There was he didn't ask me how my mother was, how my father was. He was, Bismillah, Mashi. And I'd give him my darts, and then I'd read the lines, he'd give me the darts, and that was it. When time was done, he was like, go. And it was his personality. He was just like, he was about business. And it was just his style. And when I went to Shaykh Muhammad Tahir, he was the youngest son of Marab al-Hajj. And he, I would go to him, and he would be milking the cow or the sheep or the goat or whatever, and he right there he gave me the darts while he's milking the cow.
SubhanAllah.
I thought it was like it was just, and but they all had their, the jalalic qualities of the shit. In Mauritania, you have each culture has its different qualities and characteristics. Where you have, like, if you go to Yemen, if you ever seen Habib Omar or Habib Ali Jifri, their turbans are very ironed and very creased, they're very neat. The Pakistani Shuyukh have they're very straight, and their clothes are neat. They all have their own. But in Mauritania, they are very, not as neat and polished outwardly, but when you're in their presence, you can feel their haiba, their presence is very, it's like gravity. It's like a gravitational pull, and it just pulls you in. And they have a lot of dignity, a lot of honor, because they're ulama. They're ulama. And I was just I would observe. I would observe them making wudu. I would observe them, try to get things I just couldn't get from a book.
Right.
How they sat, how they talked, how they joked, how they ate, all the things. I would just watch them, and each of them was different. And Rami gave me good advice. He told me to go to each one and take the same lessons from each shaykh every day, and that's what I did. And I see the wisdom in that now. That I'd ask the same questions, I would get different answers. So I learned that it wasn't just it was fiqh is in a lot of it's interpretational. People have different opinions, and I learned the value of having differences of opinions. And so I thought I was learning, and I felt myself learning. And they say in Mauritania, 1 year in Mauritania is like 5 or 10 years somewhere else.
SubhanAllah. Because
there's barakah in the time. So alhamdulillah, I never got sick again after that, and I just went on with my lessons. And
your typical lesson, Mujahid, you would start at 9 o'clock, and you go to different shuyukh and different tents, rotate with them, take the lesson, write it down your low. When did your day end? I mean, in terms of when was the official durus over? And so when you got the lesson, was it mostly memorizing it to memory and then going back to Shaykh and giving it back to him?
Well, the day my day started, it was around, like I said, about 9 o'clock. I would go to Shaykh Hadjimi. It ended. Each lesson will take you no longer than 20, 25 minutes. It was a long lesson. I mean, that was a long lesson. Because I take about 5, 6 five, 6 lines maybe at most a day. And so it ended around before noon, 11:30, somewhere around there before noon. Mm-hmm. It would end, and you go back to the tent, after socializing. What I would do is, because there are other students there, so it's one-on-one. When it's your turn to sit with the shaykh, everybody else is sitting around, like around the shaykh and waiting their turn. Sometimes there's maybe a group of students of 2 or 3 learning and doing the same lines, and they study all at one time. But usually it was one-on-one. So I would listen to other people's lessons as best I could. Some students were studying, other books in grammar, Quran, other books in fiqh, books in other subjects. And I would listen, and I would wait my turn. And when I finished, if there were anyone left, if there's anyone left, I would listen, and then I would leave. I would go back to my tent. I would go to get my lesson from the other shuyukh, and that was my day. And I would go back and memorize. And so the question is, it's memorization and study. So I go back and read the commentary from the book that I was studying, because the book that I was studying, another was Aslul Masalik. The short of the commentary was called Siraj Salik. So I would study the lesson. I had I can't remember if I had a dictionary with me. I'm sure I did. Yeah, I did. I had to have a dictionary with me. I had my dictionary, and I would study my lesson, and then I would prepare for the next day. So
was there a library there that you could have resources, or everyone had their own? No.
Each sheikh had their own personal books, kept away, but they were old. They weren't like the libraries, they were like manuscript form books, a lot of them. Handwritten stuff. They had collections of things. Some books, students would bring them from, outside, but the students didn't really have access to those books, to those church personal books. Sometimes, the library, Abdul Hajj, you would see some students take a book like Charlotte Muqtasir Khalil or something, but there wasn't, just free access to everyone like that.
So was it like 7 days a week at the same instruction, or was there weekends? And if there was, what did you do on the weekend?
Well, good question. The weekend there was Thursday and Friday, right? So there was no lessons Thursday and Friday ever, right? That was the utla, that was the weekend. And where we were, we were in the mountains, and you could take, you could go and walk. The students will go and take walks in different places. You go and they have caves and things, and it's a sight to behold. But a student came from America. Actually, he's American, but he came from, he was raised in Morocco. His name is Yusuf Kasrit. He's a professor now at University of Chicago. Anyway, he came, and subhanAllah, he was a very nice brother. So we would take walks. He was, and so we would, we would take walks. He would take me, come to my tent, because I was kind of confined to my tent. I'd befriend another student I would go to, Ibrahim. But he would come to my tent, and he would take me some far out, some caves in the mountains, and go. And I called him white walks, because he was, we would joke, he was a white brother. And so I said, man, I said, black people, we don't walk like this back home. So he would laugh, and if I called him today, we joke about, Mujahid, we can go on our white walks. So he would take me, and so these people became my good friends to this day. But there wasn't much to do other than study. To your question, I mean, really, there was no entertainment. There was no radio. There was no television, no electricity whatsoever. So you learn, the time, the barakah in the time, that you have a day would seem like a week, one day, because, you don't have, you have you and the book and other students, the students at lunchtime, you would, they cook rice for lunch, and they would sprinkle it with some, beef jerky, dried meat, like what's called beef jerky now, I guess. And you were lucky if you got some of the meat, right? And in the evening time, they'll cook macaroni noodles with, they'd get some potatoes, tomatoes, something, and maybe a couple of pieces of meat. And that was it every single day. You ate the same thing for every, we ate the same thing every single day. So food, food is not a source of entertainment. Food becomes a source of energy and survival, and that's it.
Would there be anybody from outside of town that would come in and bring, the hot Cheetos or something?
No, there was no snacks, nothing like that. Unless you brought some, I bought a can of sardines. I brought olive oil. I had a gazia, what they call it? They call it a gazia. Like, it was like a portable, gas tank. You could heat up something. So but it ran out, it runs out quickly. So once I ran out, I ate, with everyone else. And, you lose weight, You lose. It was just food becomes just, oh, you forget to eat. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, subhanAllah, it's time to go eat, because your mind is on other things, because out of sight, out of mind, right? So
Right.
that was life. That's why they say it's such a good place to study, because there's nothing else to do. From what I understand, a lot of students I talk to, friends I have gone to Egypt or other places, there's so many other things to do. Many people will go there and they never study at all. It's just socializing and things like that.
Right. So there's no distractions really. I mean, there's
No.
just you, the books. I mean, really, the distraction that we have in today's time, none of that is there, so you can really absorb a lot, and
Right.
It's interesting the advice that Shaykh gave you, going to different teachers. I also learned that during my informal studies, going to different muftis and ulama, when I'm studying one book and asking those masail to them, it's not fatwa shopping, but rather you get a different perspective, because we are students of knowledge at that time, So I think it's wonderful advice to see how different scholars bring in different texts. But going back to your day, so mashallah, I mean, it was just no distractions, point on studies. You said no electricity.
No.
Now, I know California is hot, but how did you manage? I mean, I asked you if there's a fridge, and you just joked. I think you said there's no refrigerator. What Iceman who would come down, sell ice?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because you just made me remember something that I went to the tent, my friend Ibrahim's tent, the brother from I think it was from Guinea Conakry. And he gave me some water, and it was cold. And I was like, subhanAllah, where'd you get this from? It was no, like you said, there's no refrigeration at all. Well, what they do is they take the animal skin, right? We have to slaughter an animal. I learned, they don't throw anything away, first of all, right? There's usage for everything of the parts of the animal. The skin, they would clean it, and they would put water in it, and the water would stay cold in the desert. And there may be some things in the water. It's not like crystal clear water you buy from CVS or something. But it was cold, and that's all I cared about. So he had, I learned, the way they would use certain things, certain wooden bowls. You read about in the hadith that the Prophet would drink milk out of a wooden bowl. They had wooden bowls, and they drank the milk from. You see certain aspects of the Sunnah, things that you read about in books. You see the shepherd, he would take the goats out, the sheep. I would see them in the morning, they would go, and I would see them when they come back. And it was a prophetic picture, because you read about these mental pictures you get from reading these stories. And it was just like, you sit back home, and you see the cars on the highway, rush hour. Over there, the cow, all the animals, the shepherd would take them all out, and in the morning, and they bring them right back in the afternoon. It was a sight to see. So I just adapted. They told me that I was told, don't go there and try to be an American. Don't go there and try to live and think like you're an American, because you're not going to have anything of what you know of back home there. And, it's going to make it more difficult for you. So that's what I did. I just tried my best, to work with what I had and think like they did. So,
how long were you there in your initial trip to Mauritania? I know because after Mauritania, you went other places to study, and we're not going to talk about your time in Jeddah at IN. You spent several years there studying. I think we won't have enough time to get to that, because we also want to get to Fayda Institute, and you established in USA. So, but just in Mauritania specifically, how long were you there for?
The initial first time I was there, I don't know, it might have been a year. Yeah, about around that time, but it seemed like 10 years,
Right.
It really did. I was, I would go all the time to Shaykh Academy, because I was worried about my family back home. And he would told me, stories that had some wisdom at the end to make me feel better, make me feel more comfortable. But eventually, Rami came with Sheikh Saleh to the village, and I went back to Kifa. I ended up leaving Trinidad and going to Kifa, which is the city of Sheikh Saleh, and I spent time there. And then Sheikh Saleh was coming back to America with Rami, and so I had no plans to leave Mauritania at the time. Then I went to the village of Sheikh Muhammad Hassan Qadim in a city called Tegent, and the Mahad Taysir, the Taysir Seminary. And man, he was amazing. I had a whole different experience there.
Where's Taysir? Where's Mahad Taysir?
It's about an hour outside the capital of Nouakchott. So It's much easier to get to for the students. And there were more students there. They weren't foreigner. I was the only foreigner there at the time. But I made some good friends. That good friends to this day. Sheikh Muhammad Hassan Qadim was simply amazing. He was an amazing person. Just to be in his presence was amazing. And I learned from other students. They tried to teach me their Hassaniya, which is their local language, and I didn't want to learn the local language. I wanted to just study Fusha Arabic. I would study with them. They would give me, extra help on the side. I studied other books with the teachers that were there, some of the Sheikh's sons that were there. And I would go back and forth to Nouakchott at that time because I was close. And I just spent my remaining time doing that in Taysir. And then I came back to America. But when I finished, I look back at my whole experience was so diverse because each place I was different. And each teacher that I had was different. They all had their own different style, their different personalities. And they each gave me, priceless advice about seeking knowledge, both inwardly and practicing it outwardly. And they were examples for me for that. I came back with a new perspective on life, a new perspective on my intentions, new objectives for what I wanted to do with what I learned, and I wanted to just keep learning. So every teacher I've had since then has been Mauritanian. I've only
let me ask you, Mujahid, let me ask this question. You raised a very important point about intentions. And this came to my mind when you were telling me about the story in the village where a lot of the people studying there were families and the families of ulamas and studying there. Nowadays, when our students study, they're looking at, unfortunately, many of our students who study, right, and the dini ulum, is that when I graduate, how will I get paid, right? Like how much is it gonna, what's my net income gonna be? How much can I make as an imam? How much can I make as a teacher? I mean, those students that are studying there, what is their outlook on terms of, okay, well, when I graduate, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna make a living? Is that not a concern for them out there? How am I gonna make a living?
Well, not necessarily from their studies. Many of them study and they finish. If they finish, they'll go be businessmen. They have their own shops or family stores they have back home in their own villages. But want to teach, but a lot of the shuyukh are still there. They're older, so there's not a lot of room for them really to have a lot of students because the students are still going to the other, the kibar, the big sheikhs. But they don't, the concept of that, like we have in America, like you mentioned, having a career, making money, getting on the lecture circuit, there's none of that for them. That's not why they do it. First of all, that's not why you should seek knowledge. If you seek knowledge for that reason, you're really destroying yourself. There's a lot of reasons you can seek knowledge. There's a lot of, reasons people seek knowledge in our culture that is just wrong, and the books of tasawwuf, they're filled with a lot of wisdom that teach you this, why you shouldn't teach. This hadith about, hadith Qudsi, about where Allah says that he gave the person knowledge. And what did you do with it? He asked him on the day of judgment, what did you do with it? And the student said, oh, Allah, I learned and I taught, in your name. And Allah says, you lied. Allah, you taught so people can call you knowledgeable. And so Allah grabbed him by his nostril, dragged him on his face, and throw him into the hellfire. And this type of, he goes on about the person he gave a beautiful voice to, he gave a lot of money to, and the same thing. And it's scary. It's just, why are you doing what you're doing? And the only reason why you seek knowledge is to get close to Allah. Nothing else. No ijaza, no shahada, no degree, no money, no career, no, because what happens is people praise you. People love people who, in Islam, people love the ulama. They want to kiss people, want to kiss your hand, they want to kiss your forehead. And you'll see the shuyukh, they pull their hands away. They don't want that, because that stuff, it gets into the heart. And that's not how they see themselves. You're just seeking knowledge to learn, to get to know Allah, to get closer to Allah, because the quickest way to get close to Allah is through knowledge. Allah, he mentions this in the Quran about those who know as opposed to those who do not know, and those who have khashma, and many other things in hadith. So the virtue of knowledge is well known. It's just why do you want that knowledge is what the way in our time. People become arrogant. People become, showing off. They love of praise. Huba jah, huba madah, huba riyasa. They love leadership. And these things, you can, and if you're observant enough, you can see them very clearly on the internet, on social media. And people argue, students want to learn so they can go argue with the next group. They want to go, my sheikh is better than your sheikh, and you say this and that's wrong, and this, and it becomes this whole thing of argumentation. And this is not the purpose of knowledge. So I learned that, the empty wheelbarrow always makes the most noise. And I always observed those who had knowledge and they spoke very little. And those who were ignorant, they were always the ones talking. And I learned just from watching. And when I read these things in the book, it was like, yes, I see this. I see this every day, or you may know people like this. And so you just want to be careful to make sure that you're not in that group. So, by studying more, it humbles you, because the more you study, the more you know how ignorant you truly are, how much you don't know.
I think this is a very important point, Sheikh, you mentioned, because nowadays, a lot of it, for example, may Allah give us sincerity of intention, especially the scholars that are, very popular, may Allah give them sincerity of intention. A lot of it ends up being, like nowadays, monetization, right? How many likes do I get? I met one scholar, a young scholar, in his early 30s, and we're talking about marketing. He said, what I want is YouTube hits on my channel. So he wanted a marketing scheme developed so that he could get maximized hits on his videos on YouTube, right? And I'm like, subhanAllah, this is hubbijah. What is the purpose of this? If the goal is to spread the haqq, that's one thing, but you just want specifically hits on my video so I can get X million views and become popular and get, and so may Allah give all of us sincerity. We're not here to judge anyone's intentions. Allah knows that best. Sheikh, there are a number of questions here. You said you spent about a year or so in Mauritania. I know you went to Jeddah in Saudi and you studied with shuyukh over there. Just quickly to wrap up, because we want to get to Fayda Institute and what it does and that platform. So just quickly in a few minutes, tell us about how long you studied in Saudi, what you studied, and then and Al Ain in UAE, how long you studied there as well, and then when you came back to America.
Yeah.
And then there's a Q&A, we'll get to that.
Yeah. Well, when I came back to America, then we decided to leave America. I wanted to leave America. So we went to, I got a job at the university teaching English. where I met Sheikh Sumer. And I studied with Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya. He was a Mauritanian Sheikh. He's very well known. If you don't know him, he's very well known. He lives in Jeddah, so I would go to him, and I'll go to his house every day. He wasn't there every day, but there were other shuyukh in his house living with him, and his son's house living with him. So I would go there, and they were in High Amiri Fawaz, I remember the neighborhood. It was close. It was close to where I was. And anyway, I just continued to study. I sought out Mauritanian teachers. So I never left Mauritania. Wherever I would go, I would find a Mauritanian teacher. And from Saudi, I went to the UAE, where I ended up studying with the two sons of Sheikh Haddamin, of whom I studied with in Mauritania. And so when I went to his son, Shaykh Mujahid Abdul Karim, he lived about 10 minutes, no more than 15 minutes from where I was. And I went to him the first day with the book, Mustafa Khalil, which was my goal. My goal was to get to Khalil, which Khalil is the seminal text of the Maliki school. So I studied a book called Kafaf, which was like a primer to Khalil. So then I was so excited, and I went to I started studying the book with Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya in Jeddah. But then when I went to Sheikh Mohammed in Al Ain in the UAE, I started all over from the beginning, and we did the whole book. And then I studied with his brother Sheikh Dahan, other Alfiya ibn Malik and other books. And just to this day, I still study with him on the phone. Skype. I'm still a student. I've never stopped being a student. That's the one thing you learn. You never stop being a student.
So your journey of studies, I mean, formal studies, I know you did a lot of studies in America. So Mauritania, Jeddah, and UAE, that time it was about 15 years of continuous studies?
Yeah, collectively. I'm still in it. I'm still studying. So it never stops. Taking knowledge, talable ilm, min al-mahad ila lahad. It's from the cradle to the grave. It doesn't stop. That's one thing you learn, is that Islam is the deen of learning, the deen of knowledge. And so, when you understand it, the ocean that we have at our disposal of books, just one madhab alone, it would take you a lifetime, 2 lifetimes to study the Hanafi school, 2 lifetimes to study the Maliki school, the Shafi'i school. And so you see them in the books that has been written, you study them not once. See, we're used to in America studying a book and one time, if that. And when you go to a university, a graduate school, you don't read the entire book word for word, and you don't read it more than one time for sure. But in Islam, you study the whole book word for word, from cover to cover. I asked Sheikh Dahan, how long did he take to study Khalil? He said 8 years. He studied one book for 8 years. He studied it twice. I said, subhanAllah, 8 years, that's a BA, that's a master's degree. That's 6 years, right? And 2 years of PhD coursework.
Right.
So that's one book. So to Westerners, our concept of what knowledge is, what it looks like, and how to, the process of getting knowledge is very different, right? So I wanted to take what I had learned collectively and somehow, try to bring it back to my people, bring it back to, again, starting out where I was and what inspired me in the beginning. I had this thirst to rectify the condition of Black people in America. And I felt, and I still to this day believe, that traditional Islamic knowledge is the key, because it opens up my experience. It's experiential. It opens up so many doors. It's like a light switch comes on. And the very thing that I found that we have all the personalities, we have all the groups, organizations, people, and things like that, but we didn't have a system of learning that was established where people can learn what they are obligated to know. And the closest thing that we have in my community is the Claire Muhammad schools, which Claire Muhammad, she was the wife of Elijah Muhammad from the Nation of Islam. She established a system of schools across the country that's still, on and active today. But it's not traditional Islamic knowledge. It's not like it's the Daughter Ulum program or the Alim program like that. We don't have anything like that. So I saw a big need for something like that. So I was asked by some students earlier to teach them. So I said, well, let me start an institute. Start something where we can teach, we can have traditional knowledge and disseminate traditional knowledge from the books. And with the intention to establish a culture of learning that would erase all the argumentation, all the disputation and silly conversations people have about, where is Allah and does Allah have a hand, or, all of these other things that have been settled hundreds of years ago, people are still arguing about because they don't have the knowledge. And they're arguing and discussing things about which they really haven't studied. So I felt a big need, a responsibility even, to establish something by where people can come and learn and study and be transformed, right? So, I looked at, going back to my studies in history, what transformed Africa, West Africa, to the golden age of Islam. What made it the golden age of Islam? It was the Islamic knowledge. It was the Islamic universities and institutes that it made them, the people that came out, the books that were written were, they were just so great. So our experience as, oppressed people, stigmatized group, people who were descendants of former slaves, I wanted to take what I learned, the system that the men had, the methodology that I learned, and establish it among my community to help it grow. And that was my intention for starting Fayda Institute.
So at what point did you feel like I have to have an institute? Initially, you began with your journey, I got to learn and maybe teach my people, but at what point you say, I need an organization, institute, where along your studies that kind of clicked in your mind?
Well, I thought about it. It's always been in the back of my mind, but I never brought it to any type of, to the forefront, because I felt I had to know. I felt that I wanted to know what I was doing. I wanted to know, the methodology of choosing, this book is best for us. No, not that book. This book, then that book, in order so that I can use my own understanding of my culture and my community, along with what I learned from the traditional studies, and put them together and see what works best. And so I designed the curriculum at Fayda Institute off of the method of books that are studied in Mauritania. It's not exact, but the core is there. You study certain books in Arabic language, certain books in Aqidah, certain books in every science that make up the core of the foundation of your studies.
Right.
And after that, it's a judgment call. You can study this book or that book. It's just a preference.
So right now, Fayda Institute is online, and we'll share the link with people here if they want to check out the courses you have on Fayda Institute. Currently, it's online. I think with Shaykh Mujahid, your goal is to get it going on site, where people can benefit from the company. And I think we had talked about the plan for it in the future. Inshallah, bring scholars from Mauritania with that,
right.
With that tradition, and that to learn from the Sahaba. Because one of the big things is, we study, of course, in Sirah, is that the Sahaba became Sahaba because they had the Suhbah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that as much as, for Bayaan Academy, we're online, and Fayda is currently online, and there is a need being fulfilled through online because some people are working, doing various things, different places, different time zones. So alhamdulillah, there is a need being fulfilled. But there's nothing like, especially Dini Ulum, to sit in the company and, as you said, to learn from the demeanor of the mashayikh. How do they sit? How do they drink? Which hand do they drink with? Just little things that you observe, and, if you're as a student of knowledge, which cannot always be. So yes, we can deliver the durus online, but the whole character building has to be on site. And so, Bayaan Academy, for example, we just have a limited academic scope, and we do tarbiyah that we can verbally and coaching, stuff like that, right? But ultimately, parents have to take that step where, okay, well, here's how you sit, here's how you talk, here's how you ask a question. I think same with Fayda. I think inshallah ta'ala, we have a timeline in place that when we can inshallah see it building up.
Well, that's the goal, inshallah. If you look on our website, the first page on the website at the top, you can click on and it'll give you a whole breakdown of what it is we're trying to do here in Atlanta, which is the reason why I moved back to Atlanta, to establish a physical campus. So our campaign, our fundraising campaign is there on our website. And if you want to donate, what we need is people to sponsor, people to invest in Fayda, to give endowments. We're looking for a physical building, but things are difficult. Everything costs money, and it's not an easy thing to do, to raise that kind of money that's needed to first buy a site or rent one, but to maintain it. And so our goal is right now is to try to at best attract some investors, some people who will invest the time, the money into Fayda, so that we can get a site and we can attract students. We can bring our faculty and staff, bring more teachers. I would like to expand the program into different subjects and areas that would be more inclusive of other people's talents. Social sciences. I want to have a law school, an Islamic law school, so where we can study both fields, have specialty in Islamic law as well as American law, which is important if you're going to live in America. So, but we need institutions, and we need to support the institutions. Essentially, like I said, in the African American community, we don't have anything like this. There's nothing like what we're trying to do. We want to make this an institution that kind of sets the bar for our community. It raises the bar, it raises the standard of scholarship. So, what we need though, we need support. We need financial support.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in Fayda Institute, put barakah and khair in everything that you're doing. Keep you guys sincere and focused. Shaykh Mujahid, we have a number of questions. So if it's okay, we'll turn to the questions. And I think we really need a part 3 to continue, but khair, for now, we'll suffice on at this point with the questions. So going back to the village, Ihtisham asks, what types of food did you eat, and how did you get the food, and how did you cook them?
Wow. Well, okay. There, the food, like I said, is rice, basic staple for rice and macaroni noodles. Sometimes, you might have something, it might have, ants or some bugs in it, or the flies, all of that, all of those things that you would throw it out in America there and here, but over there, you don't throw anything out. So food was, like I said, a little bit of meat. You were lucky to get some meat, some vegetables here and there, but mostly rice and macaroni noodles.
Somebody asked, did it feel like time of Sahaba when you were out there?
Did what now?
Did it feel like that time of Sahaba,
Well, by studying the books, getting a mental picture of what you would imagine it to have been like in the time of the Sahaba, you know, it was the closest that I've ever gotten a feeling, that kind of feeling, being around those type of people. You know, you meet people that, you know, with the characteristics you only read about in books.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just, I mean, this is a real scholar. He's a real alim. He's a real salih. He's a wali of Allah. And you see them and you meet them and you see, and you can see they're different. Unlike anyone I've ever met in America, for sure. So, you know, yeah, you know, the closest that we can get to that time of the Sahaba, it was the closest I've ever felt to being in that type of environment.
And now, during your weekends or when you had time off, how did you travel? Did you ride a camel? Did you go by car or just walk?
I didn't ride a camel, no. There were camels there, but I didn't ride a camel, no. We walked, you know, wherever we went, we walked, you know, you just, long distances sometimes. You know, when you read about in the Quran about, well, like when the Prophet ﷺ said that, you know, be in this world like a traveler passing under a tree for shade. And you quickly catch the meaning of that saying when you're there, because you see a tree and it's so hot and you sit under the tree for some shade. And it's so relaxing. It's so, you know, it's just the tranquility, because it may be one of 2 or 3 trees out there.
Right.
And it's like, and it may remind you, man, this is what the Prophet was talking about. This is the feeling. And, you know, so you get that experiential knowledge. You know, it's one thing to learn it from a book, but to experience it, it's different. You know, it's a different type of knowledge. Yeah.
In the extreme heat or extreme cold, how did you manage? What did you do? How did you stay warm in the cold? And how did you stay?
Breaking up. I'm sorry, the sound is breaking up. Say it again.
All right. Now, saying in the extreme heat, how did you manage that? Or in the extreme cold of the night, how did you manage that?
Yeah, it was definitely very, very hot. There's not a lot of movement during the daytime, you know, in that type of heat. You know, sometimes it's very suffocating. You know, you would go bathe, and as soon as you finish bathing, you're in a cold sweat right all over again. Yeah, in the middle of the day, they have the Kailula. There's a rest right after Dhuhr. They don't teach. But you know, there's between Dhuhr and Asr, and just before Maghrib time, there's nothing going on because it's so hot. It's just still. You know, you may be visiting people in their tent, you know, socializing if that's the case with the other students, but at the most, that's about it. And then you're just studying. You're studying, and you're going over your lines every day. And it becomes the sweetness of seeking knowledge. You know, it's not entertainment, but it's lavza to the soul. Meaning, like, it's how do I say lavza? It's like it's delicious to the soul. It's sweet to the soul, right? And like here today in this age, people have their cell phones and the computers. Over there, that's your book is your cell phone. That's your form of where you go for, you know, to feel safe, for solace, that's your quote unquote entertainment right there. So that's what you do.
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah. You know, the heat reminds me when we went for Hajj. You know, it's very, very hot, but you just tell yourself, you know, hey, I'm only here for, you know, 5 days or 10 days. And, yeah. You know, and the khayma, you know, and when, especially nowadays, the Hajj is coming in July and now end of June. So it's 120 degrees Fahrenheit out there. So, but you were there for a whole years. And, you know, so as far as it's a whole different story.
The whole year wasn't always hot. What I didn't know, because when I first got there, it was November, I think it was November or December. It was November or December, I can't remember. But the winter, it was like what's considered the winter time there. The nights are freezing cold. And I didn't know the desert got like that. And you know, you have sandstorms. The sandstorms would come I mean, they would just blow everything away. I mean, it was amazing. But the different patterns of weather, it gets very cold in the desert, very cold. But when the heats up in the spring and on to the summer, it's suffocating. It's suffocating. It is really. It's hard. Yeah, but when you're there for some time, you kind of get used to it. Like now, I'll come back to America. I mean, I can take any heat. Doesn't matter. Living in Jeddah, Jeddah is very hot. But living in the UAE, you get spoiled in Saudi Arabia because it's air conditioned society. Over there, there's no air conditioning. It's just you surrounding yourself. It's just trying to. It's rough. It's rough. Alhamdulillah. But the struggle, the barakah is in the struggle.
Yeah.
That's why I tell my students that, and if you're not struggling, you're not really benefiting that much. The barakah is in the struggle, and that's part of the struggle. It's a test. So, alhamdulillah.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, bless your family, and put a lot of barakah in your time, effort, and health, and preserve you, and make Fayda Institute grow from strength to strength, make it a means of guidance for Muslims in America and all over the world. Brother Mujahid, we've known each other for a very long time, and inshallah ta'ala, we are honored to have you with us today at Bayaan Academy. And I put the link, faydainstitute.org, for those who want to check out the courses out there. I want to say Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. If you want to close with a dua for us, we'd be honored.
The best dua is the Fatiha, as I was, always, reminded. So we'll just say the Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. Now, I want to say quickly to you, Sumer, thank you for everything that you've done for me and inviting me on this platform. You and the Bayaan administration, it's my honor to know you and to have you and to call you my friend. And I truly mean that. You've been a true friend to me, and you are a shining example of what at Fayda what we want to do. Have people like yourself, building institutions, and if we can gather people like that, our praises to Allah. Our praise to Allah.
Ameen. Ameen. Jazakallah Shaykh.
Tabarakallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.